Okay, so let's look at shutter speeds. Shutter speeds normally either setting on your camera cut with an S or maybe with a TV. So T with small v. So shutter speed's basically about how fast the actual camera takes the photograph. So obviously the faster the actual shutter speed is, the more it takes the photograph extremely quickly and therefore captures that moment exactly accurately, but only for a very short period of time. Particularly good for very fast moving things such as sports cars and runners and so on. So fast shutter speed sort of freezes the motion, but also shutter speed can be used maybe in like a low light situation where you want to record a period of time and create like an intentional motion blur. So you can imagine a scene where you wanted to take like traffic, but you wanted the actual lights of the cars to actually blur across the actual, picture. Examples like that can be used with exactly the same technique, but in completely different situations. So you can use it in many, many ways, as I've said already, with the sort of daytime, with like taking live action like runners and sports cars, but at night time as well, you can use the same techniques to take like with intentional motion blur. Okay, so it's ideal for all sorts of different types of photography. It's just when you want to prioritize the actual, how fast that actual picture is taken, and you want to control and capture precisely the moment. And with a bit of practice, you can get quite used to using shutter priority as well. So here's some examples of sort of speed you might want to use. So obviously we're going for like very, very fast. You go for like 1 in 500, 1,000. You're going for like somebody walking or even sort of running at a very fast pace, about 1 in 250. And normal photography, but I wouldn't really use it if you're just using it for normal photography normally. But I'd probably use aperture priority and decide which was the sort of distance as a focal length, and depth of field I wanted to go for. But in normal photography, between 1 and 60, 180. Now, if you stay on now, you can watch the original video, which we looked at in session.
And the first setting that every new photographer should be accessing is something called TV mode. Now, on top of your camera, usually on a dial up there, you will see a TV, and that is shutter priority. And we are going to access and use shutter priority when we are trying to freeze motion in our shots. So this is good for sports, sometimes street photography, or cars going by. Anytime we've got something that has a bit of movement, this could be our children or kids playing on a playground. We've got a bit of movement and we want to sort of freeze that motion or that image in time without any blurriness. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the camera in that TV mode. That is going to let us make the decision about what shutter speed we're using, and then we're going to let the camera make all the other decisions for us. And when it comes to picking the right shutter speed for whatever you're doing, it's just a matter of making that shutter speed fast enough to freeze that motion. And just as an example, if you're walking around and doing sort of everyday, sort of normal photography where things aren't moving very quickly, depending on what lens you're using or how zoomed in you are, somewhere between 1/60th and 1/80th of a second is usually a perfectly acceptable shutter speed. Once people start moving, maybe they're walking, you probably need to be around 1/250th of a second. If you're following sports, you are going to probably need to be at least 1/500th of a second, maybe even 1/800th or 1/1000th of a second. And all those numbers is they represent how long your shutter is open when it's capturing the photo. So the shutter at 1/60th of a second, open, close. At 1/250th of a second, open, close. At 1/100th of a second, open, close. It's so quick. And so the shorter time that shutter is open and exposed to light, the more it captures that precise millisecond moment. So when we've got action, when we've got something moving reasonably quickly, we go into that TV mode and we dial up our shutter priority, we dial up our shutter speed until we get to the point where we have frozen that motion. And you're really only going to know which one works best for any given situation by sort of experimenting with it in that given situation yourself and with the lens, and depending on how far zoomed in you are and a number of other factors. But It's definitely something you just experiment with right on the spot. Look on the back of your screen. Once you think you found the motion froze, then that's the shutter speed you run with.